Welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most interesting topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 189th edition of Assembly Call Radio and our 644th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, October 1st, 2020. I'm your host, Andy Bottoms. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
On another week that was light on Indiana basketball news, there really aren't a whole lot of things to pick from. We're starting to see some scheduling details leak out about some other programs, but nothing definitive for IU at this point. They did have workouts resume after a pause. I think that's taken place at the very least since the last time that I was on the show. So that's positive news, but I'll stick with Trace Jackson-Davis falling inside the top 5 of the list that Inside the Hall and Dylan Burkhardt of UMHoops put out each year. They're through, they've released numbers 6 through 25 so far, which we'll be talking about later in the show. And that, barring a real surprise, Trace is going to be in the top 5. And I think as you look forward to next season, he's really always been the piece that you looked at and said, the excitement builds because you have a guy like that coming back that performed so well as a freshman, and you think about what he can do with an offseason of development, making that leap to become a sophomore and really expanding his game and continuing to build upon the strengths that he showed from a rebounding perspective, the ability to score inside, get to the free throw line. So I think he is the main reason that people are excited for this season. He's got a good supporting cast that we're all excited to talk about, but any team that really wants to challenge for whether this team can challenge for a Big Ten title, that might be a bridge too far, but at least as we've talked about expectations and really trying to have a team that falls in the top 5 of the league, it's hard to do that without a guy without at least one player who really sets himself apart and is thought of as a first team all league type of guy. And Trace is certainly that as we head into the season. And we're hopeful that the season proves that out as we go along, and we'll find out at the end of it, all things, once everything is all said and done. So with that, let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. First off, to my left.
He remembers the days when a movie cost $1. Heaven help you if you ever decide to pop your collar. Play hard, but remember, fake hustle is a crime. He's the coach and it's Tonsoni time.
Coach, it's Tonsoni time. What's on your mind this week?
Well, just sitting here still excited the fact that there's been a start date for practice, October 14th, coming up in a couple of weeks. Glad that the guys are back in the gym and the weight room starting out their workouts. But for me, the scheduling part is really going to be fascinating. And listening to a few college podcasts again on my drive back and forth to our basketball workouts in the morning, you get the idea that it's not an easy job to schedule right now. This late and with all of the issues that are facing big conferences versus your mid-majors. But the non-conference scheduling, as you know, in our bracketology world is going to be really interesting because some schools are going to only play 3 or 4 and other schools might play as many as 7 to get to the full 27. So I'm really interested. And I think a tougher non-schedule, while sometimes you may cringe and say, man, that's a tough road, in this season when maybe it's more of a, quote, eye test, which I don't enjoy that word, but maybe there's more to it when you play 6 or 7 really tough teams, the Maui Classic, the ACC Challenge, that if you lose a couple of those but are competitive, that might be okay this year. So I'm really excited to figure out the schedule as the next step in my preseason look for the Indiana Hoosiers.
Yeah, the scheduling stuff is odd, and we didn't put anything later to talk in the show about it because there's not really anything for IU, but you're starting to see teams pull out of some of these preseason events. Just, I think because of the numbers game of scheduling, the bubble in Las Vegas, it's been talked about with a lot of the West Coast teams, whatever this thing is that Duke's setting up so they can still managed to play a couple cupcakes at home without having to go anyplace else. Just a lot of moving pieces already, and that's just from what you've heard about, let alone all the stuff behind the scenes. So I'm with you. I'm anxious to see the IU schedule, obviously, but just to see the different ways that teams approach it will be interesting as we learn more as we go. And to my right,
analyzing players, finding every wrinkle. He hasn't ever hosted, never lifted a finger. He's got all the answers.
Well, let me quickly add just one thing about this.
Dude just interrupted his own jingle.
interestingly enough, earlier this week, an email came across that made me think that we might have to rework part of the beginning of that, where Ryan typed the words, "I can host," if something else happened. We later found out that he meant co-host. He was not in any way volunteering to do that. But for a moment there, I thought we were going to have to reach out to Bob Thompson to get an edited version of the song. But alas, here I am, and the song remains unchanged. Ryan, what is your rant about the last week on IU Sports?
First off, I just want to apologize.
Padres, perhaps.
Yeah, I just want to apologize to everybody listening. The San Diego Padres are in the postseason for the first time in 14 years, and I'm currently watching. We're recording this Thursday night, so I'm currently watching them just destroy my soul and get swept out of the playoffs by the Cardinals. So if I'm at all distracted, it's because I've muted myself and I'm screaming exceptionally loud profanity in my apartment. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now, Andy. I don't even know we're doing a show right now. I've been focused on this, but no, I think that, we're seeing some of these, and you guys have talked a little bit about the scheduling and how it's going to be different. I really think that it's the kind of thing where we don't know what the schedule is going to be once the schedule is even set. We're seeing the NFL had to reschedule a football game this week, so because of positive COVID tests. So I think that we're really hitting a spot with this where these schedules are all just going to be wishful, hopeful thinking, I would say. And some teams will complete their schedules and some teams won't, and things are going to happen. And I really think that all these teams setting up their basketball schedules, it's just sort of hopeful thinking at this point that it all happens. There's going to be changes, there's going to be edits, and we have to be prepared for that.
Yes, well, as a Reds fan, I can assure you that I have no desire to talk about postseason baseball. So let's move on. This week on the show, we're going to talk through a few Hoosier headlines, which, as I said before, are a little bit tough to come by, and then we'll spend the bulk of the show talking about the Big Ten top 25 players. Look at where the IU players fit in, how many made it, just the general distribution of that, and go through a few questions to see if there are guys that we thought were over or underrated in the process. Go ahead and log our complaints to Alex and Dylan on that, and then we'll answer your questions in the final segment as we always do. All that coming up this week on Assembly Call Radio. And before we get to all that, a quick announcement. Please continue to support our friends at Homefield at homefieldapparel.com by using the promo code Assembly20. They continue to roll out new schools as part of their Big News Saturday this week. They've been less secretive, although I think they've given pretty good hints for all of them at this point. But North Carolina A&T will be the school this week, the first historically black college that they'll be rolling out. And part of that, I believe, a portion of the proceeds, they're going to the I think the NAACP fund of some kind. One of you guys can check me on that, but I know they're donating part of the proceeds, which I thought was cool, and really underscores just the kind of people that Connor and the folks there are. So definitely excited to see what those designs look like, and you can check that out at homefieldapparel.com. And again, you can save 20% by using the promo code Assembly20. Hoosier headlines this week. We had happy birthday to Al Durham, who turned 22 on Wednesday, September 30th, who shares a birthday with my dad. So happy birthday to both of them. Archie also called Al an old man in a tweet, which, as someone who's nearly double his age, I found a little troubling, but I'm sure it was all in good fun. Around the same time, I think it actually might have been yesterday, or maybe it was today. On the IU official site, they've been doing these, at least a couple of these 10 question segments with some of the players. So they had these for Al. Everybody can go check that out. One of them, Ryan, that I know you'll be glad to hear about. Question 2: what teammate of yours is poised for a breakout year and why? Race. I feel as though we have yet to see him at 100%. I feel he's been working hard and he's about to get everything that he deserves. There was one of these with Joey Brunk earlier in the week who also mentioned Race. He mentioned Race and Rob Finney. So
that's right.
So yes, so,
no, I think the answer to all those, who's going to break out, I think that everybody is picking either Race Thompson or Jerome Hunter because we haven't seen them healthy. So I think that they're just the natural choice for a potential breakout candidate is two guys with a full offseason to be healthy.
Yeah, they also other highlights from Al's. What went through your mind your first workout your freshman year? He just said this is no joke, and then he also talked about what's your favorite sports memory that happened before you were 13 years old, and he called out Tracy McGrady dunking on Sean Bradley, which I think everyone probably remembers that particular dunk where
it's a bit of a throwback too.
A bit of Bradley's soul was taken, and then in let's see, Joey Brunks. He said the same thing. Robin Ray said, look great all summer. I'm excited for them. They asked him about Lakers or Heat. He said Lakers in 5 games. I would argue after last night, he might be a game too long on that, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Let's see. What else did they have here? Anything good? Indianapolis Colts and St. Louis Cardinals are his professional sports teams. So, he might be enjoying the game a little bit more than Ryan is right now, but I think a good way for them to, give people a little bit of a chance to get to know, a bit about the guys. I don't know, Coach, if you had a chance to read that or any birthday wishes for Al that you wanted to throw in.
No, I hope that, all of those breakout guys are breakout guys. We deserve, the Indiana fans deserve reaching all the potential of all the players. So that's my goal is that let's have a year where we just all play to the top of our ability. But those are good things. One of the things that's important, I really believe, is to remember that these guys are players and students and people too. And sometimes when you get these questions, you get to see a little bit of their personality, and it's a good reminder that while we get happy when they hit threes and mad when they turn over to basketball, they do have a little bit of life outside of the game. Yeah,
definitely. Then other big Hoosier birthday this week was Don Fisher. So that was this week. Jared wrote in here if anybody had a favorite Don Fisher call or one that really stood out. Coach, any really rise to the top for you? I know we play the smart one on the intro of the show every week, so that's probably the one we've heard the most, but I don't know if any others really stand out. Well,
anything where you hear his voice. I mean, it's just Indiana sports when you hear Don Fisher on the broadcast. And, I haven't had a chance to really sit down and talk to him or meet him, but my son, when he was a manager, said that Don Fisher's one of the nicest guys that you've ever met, would take time to get to know all the people in the basketball program, and that doesn't surprise me. And happy birthday to Don. I hope that he can continue going on and on and on, because whoever has to replace him is going to have some huge, shoes to fill. But happy birthday, Don, and thanks for all you do. You make when we can't tune into the television, you make and sometimes even when we tune in the television, we find your voice to be soothing. But happy birthday!
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Ryan, you have any?
The watch shot call is the big one for me, and that's been the big play in my time as a fan that stands out. It's not a championship winning call, but it's one of the great ones, and that's easily the best since I've been a fan. It went in, and he's screaming it. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I always like the Journey when they do the Big Ten version of that, and they'll usually, as they pick up big games, and at this point, watching with doing the show and the games, like more often than not, I'm home watching it on TV and really trying to follow it that way. Got too many other things going on to introduce. Also trying to listen to his call on it, but it's nice to, even in those little snippets, I think kind of like you said, Coach, just to hear his voice a bit. And I have a lot of great football memories of listening to those, whether it was, being in the car on a Saturday, driving around, doing whatever. I'll even do that sometimes today where I'll go out and just put it on my phone, mow the grass or something like that. And it's just as enjoyable to me to listen to him. And yeah, he definitely just an institution, as far as IU sports goes. So happy birthday to Fish for sure.
Andy, have you ever gotten a chance to meet him?
I have not. Well, hang on. That's a fair question. Did you have much interaction with him when you were a writer at the IDS at all?
Not when I was at the IDS, but afterward, when I was working in Columbus at the Columbus Republic, I met him just a handshake kind of thing. And then one time out in Maui, when Tom Crean took the team out to Maui his first year when they were really bad, I got to talk to Fish a few times in the press area. Just a great guy, just in general. I mean, always, he didn't know who I was, and had a really good conversation with him a couple times, and just couldn't be a nicer guy and couldn't be more I don't know, just he has a presence, and he was just such a good dude, and he didn't have to spend time doing that. I'm sure he gets people coming up to him all the time, and I'm sure he interacts with them the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. No, he's not somebody I've ever. Maybe I said hi to him in passing once, just when I went past him, but have never had the chance to sit down and talk to him. So would definitely enjoy the chance to do so. All right. Well, coming up, our friends at Inside the Hall have been releasing their annual list of the top 25 players in the Big Ten. We point out where we agree and disagree, and which Hoosiers were snubbed. That's next on the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
Hi, this is AJ Moye. What's the only thing better than upsetting Duke in the Sweet 16? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach for the Assembly Call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers!
Thank you, AJ, and welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com, and if you ever want to join the chat mob during our unedited live broadcasts or watch those replays and see all the between-segment banter, then check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Andy Bottoms here with the coach, Brian Tonsoni, and the shot doctor, Ryan Phillips, and the main thing we wanted to touch on tonight was that friends at Inside the Hall and UMHoops, as they've done for, I'm not sure how many years running at this point, they put out a list of their top 25 Big Ten players heading into each season. So I wanted to run that down. I'm going to do these the little bit the same way they do in terms of listing off 5 at a time, and we'll maybe pick a guy out to talk about from that. So starting at number 25, you've got Liam Robbins of Minnesota. He's a transfer from Drake. That became immediately eligible. Adam Miller, a freshman from Illinois. I'll at least give the schools for the ones that are newcomers at least. 23rd, Christian Lander of IU. 22, Jordan Bohannon, who is back for Iowa after taking a redshirt year last year. And 21, Seth Towns for Ohio State, who's a grad transfer from Harvard. So, the IU story here is Lander, and Coach. This is probably the hard part of their exercise, and I think Alex typically puts out a podcast about this and kind of talks through some of that. How would you assess somebody like Lander, who the pedigree and the talent is there, but hasn't played in a Big Ten game, and all that? How would you assess him? Do you think this was too high, too low?
Well, based on what he's done in AAU and the rankings, I think this is probably appropriate. But he's got to prove it on the college floor. And so, a lot of preseason rankings, whether it's your top 20 teams, top 25 teams or whatever, are based on potential and what or what's been done in the past. I think he's probably earned the right to be in the top 25, 23, 24. He potentially can move up if he's a 5-star guard and can really adapt moving into college early. And really, if he has a better than average or good year, I think he moves up from here. But I would agree that he's in the right spot. We talked about Al Durham being, the second most dispensable player a few weeks back, and he's not even also considered. But that's just probably a talent situation between he and Lander, where Durham might be more important to this year's team as a senior leader and his offensive game than Lander is, because we have a couple point guards. But potential-wise, Christian Lander has the skills to be a top 25 Big Ten player, and I think he's appropriately listed. The question for me in this segment here is just the transfers. Liam Roberts played Indiana State, and he was good, but I don't know that he really truly was super great in the Missouri Valley. The bigs who come into the Big Ten are going to have an awakening. I don't know that it's that easy a transfer. So those would be interesting for me to watch.
Yeah, the Towns one is interesting given his injury history and things like that at Ohio State. Always been a really talented guy when he's been healthy at Harvard, but that has been more the exception than the rule. So we'll get into the next 5 here. Number 20, Justice Suing, an Ohio State guy, a transfer from Cal, although he was in the program last year and sat out. So he was a decent scorer for a pretty bad Cal team, but he's there. You've got Eric Hunter, number 19 from Purdue, Geo Baker, 18th from Rutgers, Demetric Trice at 17 from Wisconsin, and Myron Jones at 16th from Penn State. Ryan, any of these guys stand out as potentially too high or too low? We talked about Geo Baker a little bit in the break, just because I think he's gotten some flack because of where Andy Katz had him ranked as in terms of like top guys coming back in college basketball. But he was one we talked a little bit about in the break, at least.
Yeah, I think Eric Hunter will be interesting for Purdue, quite frankly. He's a guy who's, a junior. He was sort of in that same Indiana guard class as Rob Finney, and it looks like he's going to have the opportunity to really step up this year. Does he do it? I think that's what's going to be fascinating is can he live up to the billing that essentially when he came in, he was a guy they really pinpointed as somebody who would, be a big piece for them. And he's been good, but does he take that next step now that some other guys are gone and take over as a lead guard for them?
Yeah, I think he was definitely one that stood out to me. I was really impressed with the jump he made from a freshman to a sophomore. I think some of that goes to not having to play a whole lot as a freshman and being able to be around some of the veterans that they had on that team. Myron Jones, another interesting one for me with no Lamar Stevens. What does that mean for him? Certainly more shots to go around, but having Stevens there was a guy who created a lot of space for him, and he shot 40% from three, but is he able to do that again? But as a younger guy, I was fairly impressed with him. And I know, Coach, you were talking about Geo Baker, that you like guys who aren't afraid to take big shots. Ryan, I won't let Ryan chime in again with his counterpoint.
I'll stay out of it
to said argument, but I know you were talking about him a little bit.
No, I do like closers. And it's not only the desire to take big shots, you got to make a few every once in a while. And that's ultimately what's going to be the difference in Geo Baker moving up in the top 15 or moving down, is whether his stats and his percentages, as was mentioned in between segments. But I like Geo Baker a lot more than a lot of people do, just because I think if the game's close, he can take it over. And they got a couple. We are going to talk about the other Rutgers guy that just have a little bit of a toughness and a swagger to them offensively. And so that's why I kind of enjoy watching Geo Baker play.
It's a good segue to 15 through 11. So 15 is Ron Harper Jr. from Rutgers. 14, Joey Hauser, the Marquette transfer at Michigan State. 13, Rocket Watts from Michigan State as well. 12, Nate Reavers. And 11, Marcus Carr from Minnesota. I think a number of guys in this group could have reasonable arguments to be in the top 10. Rocket Watts is the one that I'm most interested in, just because I think if you want to believe in him, you're going to say this ranking is too low because of how well he played by the end of the year last year. If you don't, you're going to say that was a product of being on the floor with Cassius Winston. And maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle, but I think he's one that has a pretty wide range of outcomes within this group as well. Marcus Carr played really well. Again, doesn't have Oturu to get the ball to, but I thought he was a really solid guard for Minnesota. So some interesting guys in here. Anybody in particular, if you had to pick one of these guys, Coach, that you'd say, hey, this should have been a guy that's in the top 10? Is there one of these five that stands out to you?
Marcus Carr, for me, kind of dabbled in maybe going pro, and then is sitting here at 11. Obviously the success of your team is going to influence some of this a little bit. Minnesota has some question marks of where they're going to end up. Are they a team in the rise that can get to 8 or 9 in the Big Ten and maybe make the NCAA tournament? But I think he's skilled enough. If there's enough around him that he just doesn't have to play hero ball. Some of the guys below him in this next 6 to 10, they're nice pieces, but they're also pieces in a system. As opposed to just individually skilled basketball players. So, again, that comes down to your criteria of how you're going to rank them. Guys from Wisconsin aren't individually talented better than some of these other guys, but they're successful because of the system, and they're able to score because of the system. And does that make them better basketball players on this list, or is it just there right now in a system that's more established? But I think Marcus Carr is a young man to watch as far as his influence on the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, so as we get in from 6 through 10, this is the group that was revealed on Thursday. 10 is Joe Wieskamp from Iowa. 9, Aaron Henry from Michigan State. 8, Isaiah Livers from Michigan. 7, Travion Williams from Purdue. And 6, Micah Potter from Wisconsin. Ryan, I would hesitate to give you the chance to talk about Wisconsin guys. So does Potter seem too high? Is the gap between him and Nate Reavers too big, between 6 and 12? Give us your thoughts on Wisconsin big men as an aficionado of such things.
I'm going to pass on this one, but I do have someone to talk about on this list, and it's Joe Wieskamp, and he's number 10. I think that might be too high. If you look at last year's number, he did score more, but his 3-point percentage dropped by 8 points. He shot about the same amount of 3-pointers. It dropped by 8 points. His field goal percentage dropped by 6 points. He wasn't the knockdown guy you're absolutely terrified of last year that he was previously. He scored more points because he had more responsibility and played 5 more minutes per game. But I was shocked to see that his numbers actually went down, the peripheral numbers. He shot better from the free throw line, which is probably had a lot to do with that point total going up, shooting more from the free throw line and playing a bit more. But in general, his shooting numbers dropped. And the other guy is Aaron Henry. I've heard Aaron Henry hyped since he got to Michigan State. He shot 34% from three last year, 44% from the field. His numbers dropped across the board, kind of like Wieskamp, and he's up to 10 points a game. But he's never been that guy that's just this uber insanely talented guy who's out there crushing it for Michigan State. And he's entering his junior year, and we haven't really seen a breakout from him. So I'll be interested to see what both of those guys do. I feel like they're hyped because people didn't really examine what happened last year, and they're kind of hyped on their reputations. Aside from the fact that they didn't really come through last year when more was counted upon.
The narrative is better than their performance.
That's what
I feel for both of those. So I agree. And when you look at the guys we just talked about, Rocket Watts and Marcus Carr, potential wise, right? I'm not sure their stats are better than the stats of those two guys that we meant. But if I were drafting a team, would I take Wieskamp or would I take Marcus Carr on my team? Again, depending on the strategy of how you wanted to play. But I would probably take Marcus Carr and Rocket Watts and Ron Harper ahead of Wieskamp. Henry's got some athleticism to him that I like. And then Livers.
Yeah, that one's on potential. I get ranking Henry high because of the athletic potential. But we just haven't
Livers
seen it
is
as a basketball player.
Is interesting at 8 too, and I know Trevion Williams does a good job in the Purdue system and can be okay there. And Micah Potter with the 3-point shooting of the Wisconsin bigs is impressive because that makes that swing offense just dangerous because you can post up guards and then big guys have to come out and guard threes against Wisconsin. So I have no problem with Micah. I think he's a little bit too high. Again, I think that's a system number. But boy, Livers I think could really push to be in the top 5. For Michigan. So this is an interesting grouping right here of rankings that came out.
Yeah, I've Livers, his ability to stretch the floor, and really when he got hurt last year was when they started to tail off a little bit and struggle. Question for him. That's what so many of these guys, even in Aaron Henry, if you couldn't perform or really make a leap alongside Cassius Winston and Xavier Tillman and guys who defenses really had to account for, are you able to do that now that those guys are gone? I think perhaps the same can be said of Livers, where you're breaking in new point guard and some of those kinds of scenarios. So definitely an interesting group. The Micah Potter, Trevion Williams, they're the ones who are probably in the least fluid situations, at least from last year, because even Wieskamp could lose shots with Bohannon coming back and things like that. So that leaves the top 5. Now 4 of these top 5 were pretty easy to figure out. You've got Luka Garza, you've got Ayo Dosunmu, you've got Kofi Coburn, you've got Trace Jackson Davis. The other one we're assuming is Franz Wagner. I don't really know who else it would be. I don't see any scenario in which Alex would allow Brad Davison to be ranked anywhere near, clearly not anywhere near this list.
What about Josh Langford?
I don't back.
I
think injury still dealing with the injury.
Last I saw, he was coming back.
I'm not sure that's been totally clear yet. So I guess it could be him. I don't know. So we're assuming Wagner for the purposes of this. Maybe tomorrow morning we'll find out that we're wrong. So I think he would have to be 5th no matter what. And then you've got those other 4, which I think those other 4 were probably the layups of the group. So the Wagner one is surprising, assuming that's right. I don't want to linger on that too much in case it turns out we're completely wrong about that. But I guess of those other guys, let's put it this way. Who do you have at number 1? Coach, I feel like I have an idea, but...
I'm going. Someone said it on Twitter. I'm going with IU. I think he's the best all-around player. Offensively, the closer that I've talked about and will continue to talk about. Just heard his coach about where better shooting, and he's been in the gym trying to extend his range. Felt that he didn't have as good a shooting performance last year as possible, so it seems like he's a little bit hungry. And then, right behind him is Trace Jackson Davis for me. And I know everyone's going to say Garza. Yeah, Garza get 30, and Iowa gives up 98. I'm impressed by your offensive ability, but I think DeSumo and Trace Jackson Davis are going to be more complete players fighting for player of the year, and I think that's going to be an upset unless the narrative just takes over that you got to give it to Garza because of points per game.
Ryan, what about you? Would you have Io at number one, or do you go Garza?
Io is number one for me, and then I've got Trace Jackson Davis and Coburn right back to back. I don't know who you put first. I have them basically tied because they both, can contribute in different ways and help you. And so I like both of those guys. And then I would put Garza right after them.
Not a lot is given to rebounding and intimidation in the lane. Coburn can really intimidate people in the lane, and he can move for a big guy. So, that's where he's good. Both those, and I think TJD is going to be better defensively. He has to be better defensively, but he can play some defense too. And being a defensive-minded guy, it bothers me sometimes when guys get accolades because they can score 24 points a game and not guard anybody, because that's the stat that you can look up and see. And so I think Trace Jackson Davis and Kofi both deserve a little more recognition sometimes than they get, even if it's just moving up from 3 to 4, moving up a couple slots.
Yeah, so as you look through it by team, you've got it's interesting that this aligns pretty well to the way that people would tier out the league. So the teams that had 3 players on the list, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan State, and Illinois. Teams that had 2 players, IU, Michigan, Ohio State, Purdue, Rutgers, and Minnesota. Minnesota may be the outlier. I think they tend to be talked about toward the bottom of that because of some of the transfers and things like that. You've got 1 at Penn State, and then the zeros, an interesting one here, Nebraska, Northwestern, not surprising, Maryland with nobody. I think based on what they lost, it's hard to argue that. Aaron Wiggins did make the also considered in no particular order, but it is kind of interesting to look at how that lays things out pretty well with how I think a lot of people are seeing the league this year. So Jared did chime in with his IU-related quibble, as he called it here. C.J. Frederick from Iowa was also in the others considered. So his contention here is that if CJ Frederick is going to make others considered, then Al Durham should have been on there. His rationale, Frederick had a better 3-point percentage on just 8 more attempts, but Al had a higher usage rate, more than double Frederick's free throw rate, had a block. I don't know what the block. So he was, I think, better in most other categories, it seems like, if I'm interpreting his note in here correctly. So yeah, I was a little bit surprised not to see Al in that mix. I think it's reasonable to potentially say he's not in the top 25, but I do think he was worthy of consideration. A lot of that group was there were a handful of newcomers in there, and then you had E.J. Liddell from Ohio State, Wiggins, as I mentioned, C.J. Frederick, Seth Lundy. Those were the returnees, and then a few freshman guys in there. Coach, did it surprise you not to see Al mentioned at all in this process, and would you have put him in your top 25?
I think Al is a huge part of our success this year, and he has been solid in his work ethic and increasing his skill level and game, and he will be a huge component for us. Do I think he's a top 25 player in the Big Ten? No, but I don't think he needs to be to help Indiana. I'm going to forget the guy that graduated, Feliz from Illinois last year. I don't know that he was a top 25 player for Illinois, but he did all the little things, and he could go out and break out and score 18 to 20 points at some point, and he had all the things that they needed over there. You don't need to be a top, all Big Ten type of player to be productive. So it didn't surprise me because, he was a top, 240 recruit coming in. He wasn't a really hugely heralded recruit when he came in. He's made himself into a solid Big Ten player, just not a top 25. If anything, C.J. Frederick's in the same boat and shouldn't even been considered as well, would probably be the way that I would have gone with it.
Yeah, I don't think Al belongs on the list. Maybe in the others considering, others receiving consideration or something like that. But I don't think Al belongs in the top 25 players in the Big Ten until he proves it. And he's got to prove it this year. We saw growth from him. We saw some individual games where I thought he played well. But we need a consistent thing. And if you're going to knock him, if you're going to knock Garza as coach did for defensively, Al had his defensive mishaps last year a lot. And so you can't just, if it's all about offense, you're not considering the back end of the floor, and he needs to be better defensively. I think has that ability. And I think at times he looked much better, but he's got to do it consistently. So yeah, until he does that on both ends of the floor, I think that you can't put him on this list.
I'm not into a lot of false motivation stuff and bulletin board material stuff, but at some point I'd have a couple guards in my office saying, you know what, people don't think you're in the top 30 of the Big Ten, Rob Finney and Al Durham, and I think differently. I believe in you, but so we're going to have a little bit of chip on our shoulder to prove to some of these people. And I know that they're good people, so I'm not really criticizing the list, because this list I think is pretty on point. A little difference at the 21 through 25 for me, but I think it's a solid list. But you could use that a little bit of motivation. Just got to be careful not to use too much of that, because it wears out quickly, I think, in the coaching world. But hey, we got something to prove for a couple players who really are important for Indiana's success.
All right, so real quick, Coach, I'll go to you first. Who on here stands out as being the most overrated, and then we'll just rapid fire these. So who was most overrated on the list in your eyes?
The most overrated, I'm going to go down to like I said, I had some issues with the 21 through 25, but I don't know if that's necessarily overrated. I think those were fair. I'm going to go down with Wieskamp at 10, along with what Ryan said. I think both Micah Potter and Trevion Williams aren't the 6th and 7th best players. I think their stats might be 6th or 7th. I think there's some players in the top 15 that'll move ahead of those. So those are the ones that come to mind for overrated.
Ryan, what about you?
I'd say Wieskamp or Aaron Henry, the two I mentioned. I think that they're overrated. And again, but I do acknowledge that both of them could come out and have great years. But if we're going on what we've seen, I think they're both overrated.
Yeah, I probably would go with those. I think if Wagner is in the top 5, that feels, again, maybe there's the pedigree from his brother. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know. But yeah, I think those guys, just assuming that, especially with Henry, that he's going to be that much more successful without the guys that were around him. I think he showed some great flashes as a freshman, but didn't see that same jump as a sophomore. So I think in that range is probably there. All right, Coach, most underrated in your eyes then on the list?
I'm going to go, I mentioned it earlier, Marcus Carr. I think he's going to be, everything for Minnesota, and I think he's poised to have a real solid year. That would be one. But really, I think 13 through 15, Watts, Hauser, and Harper can really impact their teams this year. So, and I just think those three are a little bit underrated on this list. They definitely would be, closer to 10, 9, 10, 11 if I had to make some rearranging. I don't think they're misplaced a whole lot, but that's who's on my list of underrated.
Ryan, what about you?
I'll do some fan service here. Christian Lander is underrated. How about that? I think he's a top 20 player in the Big Ten.
I think he's got to prove it. I agree. Yeah. I think he's got to prove it yet.
But that's a 5-star
The age thing's just hanging over him, right?
But that's a 5-star top point guard in the country. That gets you in the top 20, I think.
Yeah, for me, I'd probably have had Marcus Carr a bit higher. The other guy that I really think could take another leap is Eric Hunter. I hate to give too much credit to Purdue guys here, but I mean, you look his year 1 to year 2, he makes another step up as a guy that really struck me as becoming a leader on that team. And just you've seen the trajectory of some of the guys that they've had in the backcourt go through that. I think he could end up outperforming that. It's probably fair where he's at now, but I think he's a guy who could make a bit of a jump for sure. All right. Well, good work by Alex and Dylan as always, and good to actually talk about some basketball stuff. So we'll take that anytime that we can get it. So coming up in our third segment, we're going to answer your questions as we always do. So stick with us here on the Assembly Call.
This is Jordan Halls, and I never miss a shot or an episode of the Assembly Call.
Thank you, Jordan, and welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Andy Bottoms, along with Ryan Phillips and the coach Brian Tonsoni. And remember, you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU News Roundup, even during the offseason, and after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. Now time for our mailbag. Questions submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can learn more about at assemblycall.com/community. First question is from Brian, not the coach. Does IU plan to have some kind of Hoosier hysteria, without fans obviously, to introduce the team or at least use it as a conduit to promote charitable donations as the event usually does? Or will they resort solely to using social media to hype up the fans? Coach, you're a huge fan of these social media hype videos, so it's only fitting that you answer this. I honestly don't know. I haven't heard anything. I imagine they will try to do something that they would broadcast.
Maybe just broadcast it.
Yeah, I know they've done that, like stream that on BTN or BTN Plus before or something like that. But
in the day of television and needing fans, and especially now to maintain fans that you haven't been allowed to be in the gym for a while, I think it's very important to have some publicity. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a practice or there was some sort of scrimmage that was filmed and on BTN or something like that. And to be honest, from a coach's perspective, nothing's worse than those open scrimmage. We do soap scrimmages in high school and all that because you lose some practice time, and that's where you really get better. But you do have to understand that it's for the fans, and generally it's for the recruits too. But if you could fill that in and have some marketing thing where recruits who are watching on their own see what you're doing, I think that has to happen. But in this day when you only got 20 hours or whatever the rules are, man, it's hard as a coach to give up some of those hours for that publicity thing. But it is one of those necessary things that has to be done. Yeah,
you'd like to think that maybe even you donate something, because usually they collect canned goods to give to the food bank. So is there some way to donate
maybe an online
money, donate money, and then that's what allows you to see the stream of it or something like that,
or just like during it have a donate button that people can click on and donate a few bucks or whatever. There's ways to do it. They just have to get creative this year.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll figure out some way to do it. All right, Chris, I've seen IU pick 7th in the Big Ten, also listed as a 5th seed in the NCAA tournament. What is the bottom line for us to feel we're moving forward and not just a middle of the pack Big Ten program? I think we've talked about this a few times over the course of the offseason.
Talked about it on the Hysterics podcast.
And on that, yeah. So Ryan, maybe reiterate your stance on kind of where things need to be.
Typically it's top 4 in the Big Ten for me. And the other criteria for me is to easily make the NCAA tournament, where you're not waiting till selection Sunday or a week before to figure, or the Big Ten tournament to figure if you're in. But I would also say it might not be the top 4 this year because of how good the conference is going to be. I would say in that top group, whatever that is, that's 5, 6, whatever, that are within a couple games of the regular season title, that top group, and be, in it and be challenging, maybe not win the Big Ten title. That's always your goal, but be challenging for that title. I think that's where you have to be to feel like IU is a program that's moving in the right direction. I feel like that's the step they have to take this year.
Coach?
Andy, this as a bracketologist, I never really realized this till I got into bracketology, and it makes just number sense that if you're a 4, 5, or a 6 seed, you're a top 25 team, and that makes you pretty dangerous in the tournament. Before I started getting into it, I thought, 5 or 6 seed, you're not very good. The tournament, it's only for 1 and 2 seeds, and a lot of those teams, top 1 and 2 seeds, do advance, and that's where you want to be. But to be consistently back as a good program, again, the top 3 or 4 in the Big Ten, making that tournament as a top 6 seed or better on a regular basis, and getting some of those 1, 2, 3 seeds every once in a while, I think is where Indiana needs to be, and I think we're closer to that than we've been at any time in recent history, even given some of the up years during the Crean years. We still just need to display some patience. But the question also said a 7th Big Ten finish. Andy Katz has a 7th in the Big Ten, but a 5 seed. I would look at that seed. That's a top 25 team That's pretty good for anyone in college basketball. Even though the road to the Final Four is a little tougher in that kind of thing, but the top 25, number 25 team in the nation is a 7 seed. So I've tried to remember that in the most recent years.
Yeah, I think that's where one of the things that I guess came to realize as part of doing that is, one, it doesn't really matter where you finish in the league in terms of what seed you get. It's about your resume. And so I think you could, I don't think we'd feel great about a 7th place finish. I think most of us, as Ryan said, are hoping for top 4, top 5 as the next step in the building process. But you could see with a deep Big Ten, if you do finish 7th, it doesn't mean you're not going to get a good seed in the tournament, so long as you're winning some games and see how the non-conference plays out, all the scheduling stuff that we alluded to a little bit earlier in the show. So I don't, if the 7th place in the Big Ten of those two things that you mentioned would probably not feel all that great without really seeing how the Big Ten teams are going to play. But I think a 5 seed you'd feel relatively good about, because as Coach said, that puts you in that top 20 type position. So I think both those things are fine. But yeah, I tend to feel like you need to be top 5 in the league, and if you're able to do that, the seeding piece of it really takes care of itself. But you need to see that next big step this year, because the incremental improvements over the last couple of years just haven't been enough. This one from Jared: if I told you Luka Garza doesn't win Big Ten Player of the Year, who would you bet is the winner? He said, we know Coach will pick Ayo. I guess if you and apparently Ryan will too, because he
I would,
because he said that. That feels the most likely, because I think even if Wisconsin was to win the league, because a lot of times it'll come from a team that finishes, really high in the league. If Wisconsin won the league, I don't know that one guy really stands out above everybody else to a point where, oh yeah, Micah Potter is the guy, or Nate Reavers is the guy, or whatever that case might be. So I would tend to say Ayo, just because he's probably going to put up numbers either way, and it seems really unlikely that they fall out of the top 2 of the league. So I think that's probably a clean sweep. Any dark horse candidates on that one from anybody?
Trace Jackson Davis. Would love to see him push for it.
There we are. All right.
Hey, Ryan, real quick. I mean, if we had time, when you hear interviews from players, you learn a little bit about their swagger on the court. When I had a chance to listen to IU talk, I'm not into the pop your collar stuff, but I am into the real confident, I want the ball. And boy, in his press conferences, he lets you know that he's there to win and not mess around. And some people see that as a little cocky, but I kind of like that with an attitude, as long as it's not outwardly displayed too much on the court.
You want that cockiness from your alpha dog. Maybe not from your bench guys, maybe not from the third scorer on your team, and you want a little humility from some of those guys. But from your alpha dog, you want that Kobe, Jordan, mentality. You don't expect them to be that good, but you want that mentality where they want the ball and they think they can beat you. I mean, there were times you watch Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant can essentially say to the defender, I have the ball here. I'm going to take it right there. I'm going to score, and there's nothing you can do about it. You want that attitude. And I think Ayo does have that. I mean, you've seen him hit enough big shots last year to know that that's a guy who has confidence in himself, to the point where he always thinks he's going to come through.
And through Delphi Bracketology Media Access, I've heard him talk in the press room, and boy, he lets you know that I'm going to take it, and this is what I do. I score. That's why I got the ball. I mean, he's a great interview. And I know that doesn't mean you're going to be a great basketball player, because Tim Priller was a good interview. But no offense, Tim, but I think Ayo is going to be the one to take it this year.
All right, we got this question in from Jeremy here, Ryan's friend. Should Ryan A, braid his beard, B, grow it into a giant goatee like the lead singer of Anthrax, or C, trim it like a 19th century cavalry officer?
How about just D, shave it?
Braid it.
I really just want to shave it.
I'm not sure what's stopping you at this point. This is within your control.
I want to do it all at once, and it's been really hard to get a haircut. I want to do it all at once. That's the only thing.
I think you're really starting to like it. I feel like the haircut excuse has grown weary, and that you've really grown to enjoy it, and this is just who you are now, and we all need to get used to it. As difficult as that may be. Anyway,
I tweeted that picture out without his beard. I almost
That's
didn't
it.
recognize
We're done. No more questions.
All right. Well, that will do it for tonight's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing most of the music you hear on the show. And thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again next Thursday night. Until then,
take it from me, AJ Moye. Keep your elbows in, eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.